Translation of Huisi's meaning of the Lotus Sutra's Course of Ease and Bliss, translated by Daniel B. Stevenson and Hiroshi Kano. Preached during the Chen Dynasty by the great Dhyana Master Zhiyi of Nanyue. The Lotus Sutra is a Dharma gate of sudden enlightenment proper to the great vehicle, whereby one awakens spontaneously without resorting to a teacher and speedily attains the Buddhahood. It is a Dharma gate that people under any circumstance find difficult to believe. Novice bodhisattvas in quest of the great vehicle, who wish to achieve Buddhahood more quickly than all the other bodhisattvas, must keep the moral precepts, forbear in the face of humiliation, persevere with vigor, attend earnestly to the development of dhyana concentration, and strive with singular focus to cultivate the lotus samadhi. Looking upon each and every being as though it were a Buddha, they should join their palms and venerate it as though paying reverence to the Blessed One himself. They should also regard each and every being as a great bodhisattva and good spiritual friend. Their fierce determination in the quest for Buddhahood should resemble the arduous feats and painful austerities undertaken by the Bodhisattva Medicine King. Long ago, under the Dharma of Buddha, pure in bright excellence of sun and moon, Medicine King was known as Bodhisattva seen with joy by all living beings. He heard the Lotus Sutra, sought Buddhahood with steadfast perseverance, and within the span of a single lifetime acquired the supernatural powers of a Buddha. Or their determination should take after that of King Marvelous Adornment from long ago. Having renounced the throne in favor of his younger brother, the king, together with sundry ministers, his wife, the two princes, and members of his inner and outer retinues, left the household life under the Dharma of Buddha, king of thunder sound of clouds. He recited the Lotus Sutra and resolutely strove to realize Buddhahood. Over the course of 84,000 years, the span of a single lifespan, he became endowed with the supernatural powers of the Buddhas and received prophecy that he himself would become a Buddha. Being at their greatest length, people's lifespans during that era measured 89,000 years, a figure that correlates to a lifespan of 80 years and 400 days in our current day Jambudvipa, or lifespans of 84 years in the other three continents. Lifespans of the present age are by comparison short. In this evil age, when the kalpa is in turmoil, miseries press us and our afflictions are many. Consequently, seeking Buddhahood in this age should be easy to accomplish. The practice of regarding each and every being as though it were a Buddha is as expounded in the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging chapter. Striving to develop dhyana concentration is as described in the opening section of the Course of Ease and Bliss chapter. Why should one strive to cultivate dhyana concentration? All beings are endowed in full with the treasure store of the body of Dharma essence. They are one and the same with, and not different from, the Buddhas. It is as expounded in the Buddha Pitaka Sutra. The 32 major marks and 18 minor excellences are lucid and pure. It is simply due to the illusory impairments of a befuddled mind and the soiling of the six sense faculties that the Dharma body fails to appear, just as images will not show on the surface of a mirror when it is sullied with dust and grime. Thus, if practitioners apply themselves diligently to dhyana concentration and purify the filth of the root delusions, the Dharma body will appear in full. For this reason, the Lotus Sutra speaks of the Dharma Master's pure and everlasting eye, born of one's very father and mother, noting that ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are all like this as well. When sitting in dhyana, one does not perceive objects to be either everlasting or impermanent. As it says in the Course of Ease and Bliss chapter, the Bodhisattva discerns all things to be without permanent abiding, and also without any mark of arising or perishing. This is known as the reins of associations appropriate to the wise. If you long to seek supreme enlightenment, practice the Lotus Sutra. You will realize with this very body and mind the pure and marvelous Dharma gate that is the ambrosia of the deathless. Keep the precepts, forbear in the face of humiliation, and cultivate the dhyana concentrations. You will thereby acquire the samadhi of the Buddhas and realize that the 6 sense faculties are by nature perfectly pure. Bodhisattvas who practice the lotus strive to fulfill 2 types of regimen. The first is practice devoid of distinguishing features. The second, practice endowed with distinguishing features. The featureless fourfold, ease and bliss, entails exceedingly profound and marvelous forms of dhyana concentration, whereby one contemplates the 6 sense faculties and all phenomena as pure from the outset. Living beings are by nature without stain, without origin, and without purity. Bodhisattvas who pursue this course do not engage in practice of remedial counteragents. In so doing, they spontaneously surpass the myriad saints. Spontaneously, they awaken without a teacher and without proceeding by way of a graduated sequence of practices. Their comprehension is the same of the Buddhas, the marvelous enlightenment which has the nature of perfect lucidity. Coursing in the supremely marvelous 6 supernatural powers and the pure practices of ease and bliss, the Bodhisattvas of the Lotus Sutra do not wander the byways of the 2 vehicles, but travel the 8-fold noble path of the great vehicle. These bodhisattvas, endowed with great loving kindness and compassion, become fully equipped with the practices of the one vehicle. The exceedingly profound treasure store of the thus come one ultimately knows no aging or decline. This is known as the Mahayana, the 8-fold noble path of the thus come ones. Sentient beings are intrinsically free of the 5 desires and have no further need to eradicate afflictions. The Sutra of the Lotus Blossom of the Marvelous Dharma is the great Mahayana. If living beings practice as it instructs, they will attain Buddhahood spontaneously. What do we mean by the term one vehicle? It is to say that each and every living being, by dint of the treasure store of the thus come one, ultimately knows lasting ease and bliss. Moreover, it is akin to the question that Bodhisattva Lion's Roar posed to the Buddha in the Nirvana Sutra. World-honored one, is the meaning of ultimate reality unitary, or is it not unitary? The Buddha's reply to Lion's Roar: it is both unitary and also not unitary, and it is neither unitary nor not unitary. Why is it referred to as unitary? It is to express the idea that each and every being is the one vehicle. Why is it referred to as not unitary? To indicate that it is not something that can be subjected to enumeration. Why is it referred to as not unitary? Because enumeration and non-enumeration are themselves utterly inapprehensible. This is what we call the basic meaning of sentient being or existence. Question: to what does the title Sutra of the Lotus Blossom of the Marvelous Dharma actually refer? Also, what do you mean by the term basic meaning of the one vehicle? What is the treasure store of the thus come one? What do you mean by the expression Mahayana, and moreover, that of Great Mahayana? As explained in the large Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, Maha means great, Yana means vehicle or arriving at the other shore. Why do you further speak of a great Mahayana? Also, what do you mean by the meaning of sentient being? Answer: it is marvelous, because sentient beings are marvelous. Dharma is precisely the Dharma that is the existence of sentient beings. Lotus blossom is a metaphor. For example, the flowers of this world, whether those of water or land, all put forth impotent blossoms that are false and do not bear fruit. Those that do produce fruit are few indeed, but with the lotus it is different. The lotus plant never puts forth impotent blossoms. When there is a blossom, there is fruit. When other flowers form fruit, it is readily visible and easy to locate. When the lotus forms fruit, its presence is difficult to determine. The impotent blossoms represent the heterodox teachings of non-Buddhist traditions. The other varieties of flowers, which produce fruit that is easy to find, represent the two vehicles. They also represent the bodhisattvas of dual capacity. The practice of the bodhisattva of dual capacity proceeds by a sequential path, involves differences in superior and inferior levels of attainment, and severs specific assemblages of affliction. Hence, it is also characterized as readily visible and easy to locate. For the bodhisattvas of the Lotus Sutra, the situation is definitely not like this. They do not engage in practice by a graduated sequence of disciplines, nor do they strive to eliminate afflictions. If one realizes the true meaning of the Lotus Sutra, one ultimately attains Buddhahood. If one cultivates the lotus practice, one does not travel the road of the two vehicles. Question: in the case of flowers other than the lotus, one blossom produces one fruit. With the lotus, one blossom produces many fruits. A single flower, a single fruit, how is this not equivalent to the one vehicle? When a single blossom produces a multitude of fruits, how is this not equivalent to the sequential path? Answer: among the various flowers of water and land, instances where a single blossom actually bears its single fruit are quite rare, while the number of blossoms that fall off and never reach maturity is great indeed. Impotent blossoms have no fruit to speak of. In the case of the single blossom producing a single fruit, it is like this. When one resolves to become a Shravaka, or follower of the lesser vehicle, there will be the fruit of the Shravaka. When one resolves to become a Pratyeka Buddha, there will be the fruit of the Pratyeka Buddha. They cannot be called the fruit of a Bodhisattva or Buddha. Moreover, the Bodhisattvas of dual capacity cultivate remedial counter-agents. Entering the way by sequential steps, they thereby ascend to the first stage. At that point, it would be unthinkable to say that the Bodhisattva has reached the 10th stage of Dharma cloud. Each stage is cultivated separately, and their realization does not occur at one single juncture. For this reason, we do not refer to it as one blossom producing a multitude of fruit. For Bodhisattvas of the lotus, the situation is decidedly not like this. With a single resolution and a single course of practice, the myriad fruits of Buddhahood are acquired in their entirety. In one and the same moment, they are realized to the full. It is not a situation where they are entered by sequential stages. This also resembles the lotus, for when one blossom produces its numerous fruits, all the fruits are formed at one and the same time. This is the meaning of the assertion that the one vehicle is sentient beings. Accordingly, the Nirvana Sutra says, in some cases there are bodhisattvas who are well versed in proceeding from stage to stage, while the Visesakitana Brahma Pari Prachna Sutra states, in some instances there are bodhisattvas who do not proceed from stage to stage. Proceeding from stage to stage is the sequential approach to practice used in the expedient path to the followers of the two vehicles and the bodhisattva of dual capacity. To not proceed from stage to stage is the approach used by the bodhisattva of keen capacity, whereby one straightaway abandons reliance on expedient devices and does not engage in sequential forms of practice. Upon realizing the Lotus Samadhi, one becomes completely equipped with the myriad spiritual fruits. Question. What do you mean by the expression, sentient beings are marvelous? What, furthermore, do you mean by dharma, that is, the existence of sentient beings? Answer. The reason that living beings are marvelous is because the attributes of the 6 sorts of sense organs found on the body of each and every person are themselves marvelous, and because the 6 sovereign kings of the senses are by nature perfectly pure. The marks or attributes of the 6 sorts of sense organs are simply the 6 sense faculties. If individuals in pursuit of supreme enlightenment receive and uphold the Lotus Sutra, if they read it, recite it, and practice as it teaches, if they discern through meditation that all things are by nature empty, and know that the 18 spheres of sensory experience are devoid of intrinsic existence, they will thereby acquire deep jhana concentration, become endowed with the 4 marvelous practices of ease and bliss, and obtain the pure and everlasting eye born of father and mother that is replete with the 6 supernatural powers. Upon acquiring this eye, they will know intimately the sphere of all the Buddhas and, moreover, know the karmic dispositions of all living beings together with the mental and physical retributions to which they are destined. Their births, their deaths, their coming forth and fading away, their superior and inferior station, their beauty and their ugliness, all of this they will know in a single instant of thought. Within the penetrating power of this eye, they acquire the 10 powers, 18 qualities unique to a Buddha, the 3 illuminations, and the 8 liberations. All manner of supernatural powers are simultaneously fulfilled in the penetrating power of this eye. How could the eyes of sentient beings not be considered marvelous? The marvelous nature of the eye of sentient beings is itself the Buddha eye. What do we mean by the word sort or type? There are 2 basic types of sentient being. One is the ordinary or unenlightened type, the other the saintly or enlightened type. Beings of the ordinary type are incapable of enlightened comprehension. They perceive forms with their eyes and thereby give rise to a mentality of craving. Craving is itself ignorance. Due to craving, one gives rise to deeds, and this we call volitional constructs. In accordance with one's deeds, one suffers retribution in various destinies, such as those as human beings or gods. Because one thereby volitionally courses one's way throughout the 6 paths of existence, it is called a volitional construct. When a given state or disposition of action continues without interruption, it is known as a sort or type. This, then, is what we mean by the ordinary or unenlightened type. Beings of the saintly type become skilled in enlightened comprehension through the auspices of a good spiritual friend. When the eye perceives form, they reflect as follows. In this very act of perceiving form, who is it that actually perceives? Is it the faculty of the eye itself that sees? Is it the eye consciousness that sees? Do space and light see? Is it form itself that brings about seeing, or does seeing occur when mental consciousness confronts it as an object? If it is simply a matter of form coming into the purview of mental consciousness, then those who are congenitally blind should be able to see forms. If form itself affects seeing, the same again would apply. If one holds that space and light bring about seeing, space and light are insentient and also lack the capacity for perceptual contact. They cannot see forms. If we say that it is the eye consciousness that sees, consciousness is without self-existence. It depends on the support of a multitude of conditioning factors, and this assemblage of conditions is by nature empty, and devoid of any coming together or dispersing. When one carefully examines each of these aspects one by one, the self-existence of the I is unobtainable. Furthermore, there is no such designation as I. If the I itself could see, people who suffer from glaucoma should still be able to distinguish forms. Why? Because in this case, the physical organ of the eye has not suffered damage. When one discerns in this manner, there is no I, no form, no seeing, no not seeing. The physical bodies of men, women, and so forth basically arrive from a single instant of deluded thinking tainted by ignorance and incomprehension. This mind of deluded thinking is like empty space. The physical body is like a dream, like a shadow, like a flame, like a conjurer's illusion, like flowers perceived in the sky. When we seek it, we find it to be unobtainable. It is not characterized by annihilation, nor by permanent existence. Pondering in this fashion, when the eye confronts form, there is no craving and attachment. Why? Because space cannot crave. Space does not eradicate ignorance and does not give rise to illumination. At this point, afflictions are themselves bodhi, the conditioned genesis of volitional constructs on the basis of ignorance is itself nirvana. The same applies for all of the factors of dependent origination down to old age and death. For if phenomena are themselves without arising, there can be no old age and death. Because they do not cling to any object whatsoever, such people are referred to as the saintly type. The ordinary type and the saintly type are without unity, without duality. The same applies for ignorance and illumination. It is with this idea in mind that we use the expression, the attributes of the 6 sorts of sense organ are marvelous. Ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are like this as well. As for the idea that the 6 sovereign kings of the sense are by nature pure, we will first take up the sovereign sense faculty of the eye. When perceiving forms with the eye, one gives rise to thoughts of craving and attachment. Craving is itself ignorance. All the afflictions, without exception, fall within the domain of craving and attachment. Insofar as there is no one who can control craving and ignorance, they are sovereign. Like a king, the idea that they are pure by nature is as explained in the foregoing section on the import of contemplating the eye faculty. Using adamantine insight, one clearly realizes that the mind of craving is, in itself, free of ignorance and devoid of old age and death. When the power of this adamantine insight reaches its greatest extent, it is known as Surangama Samadhi. This samadhi is analogous to a bold general who has the power to subdue a malevolent enemy and cleanse the world to the 4 quarters. The same applies for this adamantine insight. It is able to discern that all volitional activities informed by craving and ignorance are themselves the saintly activities of bodhi and nirvana. Ignorance and craving are themselves bodhi and adamantine insight. The nature of the sovereign king of the eye is from the outset eternally pure, without anyone who can defile it. For this reason, the Buddha speaks in the Lotus Sutra of the pure and everlasting eye, born of one's father and mother. The same applies for the ear, nose, tongue, body, and cognitive faculties. For this reason, the large Perfection of Wisdom Sutra teaches that the 6 sovereign kings of sense are by nature pure. And Bodhisattva Nagarjuna therefore states that one should know that the attributes of the 6 sorts of sense organs found on the human body are marvelous. The human body is none other than the body possessed by living beings. The body possessed by living beings is itself the body of the thus come one. For the bodies of living beings are one and the same Dharma body, which ultimately knows no change. For this reason, the Avatamsaka Sutra states, in the verses on the stage of joyfulness, Its nature is from the outset quiescence and devoid of any arising or perishing. From the beginning it is empty and forever free of afflictions. Realizing that all things are like this, one leaps triumphantly to realize Buddhahood. If ordinary persons are able to awaken to the elementary constituents of the aggregates, it will be as described as in the Nirvana Sutra. When Kasyapa asked the Buddha, "What is the meaning of this word syllable of which you speak?" The Buddha then tells Kasyapa, "There are 14 phonemes. We refer to them as the meaning of the syllables. The syllables of which we speak are known as Bodhi. Because they are constant and everlasting, they thus do not flow. Insofar as they are non-flowing, they are inexhaustible. That inexhaustibility is itself the adamantine body of the thus come one." Question. What do you mean when you say that they do not flow because they are constant and everlasting? Answer. Because the I is constant and everlasting is referred to as not flowing. What do we mean by everlasting? It is everlasting because it is unarisen. Question. In what way is it unarisen? Answer. Because the I does not come into existence. Why is this so? When the I seems form, and one proceeds meditatively to discern the origin of the I, in seeking for the I, one finds it to be unobtainable. As such, there is likewise no sensory consciousness, nor any material form that is perceived as an object of consciousness. Because the sphere of the I faculty is empty, it has neither the mark of permanent existence nor intrinsic annihilation. Nor is it a middle way between the two extremes. The sensory sphere of the I is itself the Dharma sphere of the Buddhas. One realizes that this I is without beginning, without any place of issue, and also not without beginning. Just as empty space is not subject to 3 periods of past, present, and future. In the Large Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the Bodhisattva Dharmagata says to Sadaparudita, "Good son, the Dharma of emptiness does not come and does not go. This Dharma of emptiness is itself the Buddha. The Dharma of non-arising is without any coming and without any going. This Dharma of non-arising is itself the Buddha. The Dharma of non-perishing is without coming, without going. This Dharma of non-perishing is itself the Buddha." Thus one should know that, because the sphere of the I faculty is empty, this emptiness itself is itself everlasting. Because the I is empty and everlasting, the I is itself the Buddha. The I is devoid of craving. Craving is itself flow, and flow is tantamount to arising. Since the I is devoid of craving and attachment, there is no movement. There being no movement, there is no arising. Because the I does not come into existence, there is no coming or going. The absence of arising or origination is itself the Buddha. Because the I is without arising, it also knows no perishing. To perish is to be exhausted. If the I is imperishable, we accordingly know that it is without exhaustion. Being inexhaustible, there is no coming, no going, nor any abiding. Being inexhaustible, the I is itself the Buddha. A bodhisattva, by dint of this adamantine wisdom, knows that the thus-like nature of the dharmas is devoid of origination and exhaustion. This thusness of dharmas, such as the I faculty, is itself the Buddha. Hence we have the term, thus come one. Because the adamantine body realizes the thusness of the dharmas, it is called thus come one. It is not the golden-hued body alone that constitutes the thus come one. He is called the thus come one because he has acquired the wisdom that knows the factors of the dharmas as they truly are. Because he obtains the wisdom that knows the I and form as they truly are, as well as the wisdom that knows ear and sound as they truly are, nose and odor, tongue and taste, body and touch, mind and dharma as they truly are. It is referred to as the adamantine body of the thus come one. He understands in conformity with the true character of the dharmas. He preaches in conformity with the true character of the dharmas. The word thus, or in conformity with, expresses the idea that there is no arising. Come expresses the idea of no perishing. The Buddha comes thusly and does not ever again depart. He courses in the way of things as they truly are. For this reason, he is known as the thus come one. Question: in what sutra does the Buddha teach that the thusness of the factors of the I, and so forth, is referred to as the thus come one? Answer: in the Sutra of Great Steadfast Perseverance, the Buddha asks Angulimala, what is the meaning of the term one practice? Angulimala replies to the Buddha, one practice means one vehicle. Vehicle refers to the idea of being able to carry something across. It also means to transport. Angulimala goes on to answer the Buddha in 10 ways. Each answer comprises 2 forms, making a total of 20 replies. I will now give an abbreviated explanation based on the section from Angulimala's 5th reply through his 6th reply. In these 2 sections, with their 4 forms of answers, he gives a general explanation of the idea that the I, and so forth, are the thus come one. Angulimala says, to what does the number 5 refer? To the 5 faculties. However, this explanation represents the perspective of the Sravaka vehicle. It is not the understanding of the thus come one. What is the understanding of the thus come one? That so-called faculty of the I for the thus come one is everlasting. It sees clearly and decisively, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. That so-called faculty of the ear for the thus come one is everlasting. It hears clearly and decisively, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. That so-called faculty of the nose for the thus come one is everlasting. It smells clearly and decisively, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. That so-called faculty of the tongue for the thus come one is everlasting. It tastes clearly and decisively, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. That so-called faculty of the body for the thus come one is everlasting. It feels clearly and decisively, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. That so-called faculty of mental cognition for the thus come one is everlasting. It clearly and decisively cognizes, is perfectly equipped, and operates without flaw. To what does the number 6 refer? To the so-called 6 sense accesses. This, however, represents the perspective of the Sravaka vehicle and is not the understanding of the thus come one. The so-called access of the I for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear sight enters, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. The so-called access of the ear for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear hearing enters, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. The so-called access of the nose for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear scent enters, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. The so-called access of the tongue for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear taste enters, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. The so-called access of the body for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear feel or touch enters, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. The so-called access of mental cognition for the thus come one is everlasting. It is the door through which clear and decisive cognition and pure faith enter, which is perfectly equipped and operates without flaw. For this reason, novice bodhisattvas who have just aroused the resolve to seek perfect enlightenment should discern thoroughly the fact that the origin of the I is ultimately devoid of arising and perishing. The ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are likewise, from the outset, neither annihilated nor permanently existing. Utterly quiescent, they know no arising or perishing. Form, by nature, is devoid of both emptiness and provisional existence. It does not recede, nor does it come forth. Its essential nature is pure and perfectly coterminous with true thusness, ultimately devoid of any arising or perishing. Sound, odor, taste, touch, and mental objects likewise are from the outset empty. They are neither illuminated nor are they obscured. Utterly quiescent, they are devoid of arising and perishing. Sense faculty and sense objects being empty and quiescent, the 6 spheres of sensory consciousness are also unarisen. The 3 aspects of the 6 sense faculties, sense objects, and sense consciousnesses are the nature of thusness. The 18 sensory spheres are beyond designation. Sentient beings and the thus come one together share one and the same Dharma body. Pure, wondrous, and without compare, it is called the Sutra of the Lotus Blossom of the Marvelous Dharma. For this reason, the Buddha tells King Pure Voice in the Mahasamnipata Sutra, "Your name is Pure Voice. You should purify your own sensory spheres. When the sphere of the eye faculty among your own sensory spheres is seen to be empty, you will be pure in the observance of the precepts. Because the sphere of the eye is empty, the Buddha land is thereby purified. Ear, nose, tongue, body, and the cognitive faculties are by nature completely empty and quiescent. This is what we call the thus come one's cultivation of a pure land." Question: what does the term course or practice of ease and bliss mean? Also, what is the fourfold course of ease and bliss? Furthermore, what are the 2 types of regimen, the first being practice devoid of distinguishing features, and the second practice endowed with distinguishing features? Answer: because the mind does not move when in the midst of phenomena, it is said to be easeful. Because the mind is without the aggregate of sensation when in the midst of phenomena, it is said to be blissful. Because one strives to benefit oneself and benefit others, it is said to be a course or practice. As for the fourfold course of ease and bliss, the first practice is known as the course of ease and bliss that departs from clinging through right wisdom. The second is called the course of ease and bliss, where there is no heedless praise or defamation. It is also known as the course of ease and bliss that converts the Shravakas and leads them to the wisdom of Buddhahood. The third is the course of ease and bliss that is free of affliction and perfectly equanimous, alternatively known as the course of ease and bliss that reveres good spiritual friends. The fourth is called the course of ease and bliss that draws beings to Buddhahood through loving kindness and compassion, otherwise known as the easeful course, wherein the supernatural powers, wisdom, supreme enlightenment of Buddhahood, and nirvana are fulfilled in a dream. Next comes the 2 regimens of practice. Why is it called practice devoid of distinguishing features? Practice devoid of features is itself the course of ease and bliss. While in the very midst of phenomena, all attributes of mentation are quiescent and ultimately do not arise. In this respect, it is called the featureless practice. Ever immersed in all manner of profound and marvelous dhyana concentrations, the mind always remains settled when engaged in the noble deportments of walking, standing, sitting, reclining, eating, or speaking. Other forms of dhyana concentration proceed sequentially according to the 3: desire, form and formless realms. Progressing in sequence like this, there are altogether 11 lands of concentration that are distinctly dissimilar to one another, ranging from the stages of the desire realm through the stage of pre-access concentration, the stage of the first dhyana, the stage of the second dhyana, the stage of the third dhyana, the stage of the fourth dhyana, the stage of the abodes of boundless emptiness, the stage of the abode of boundless consciousness, the stage of the abode of nothingness, to the stage of the abode of neither thought nor no thought. The two paths of the conditioned dharmas and unconditioned dharmas are additionally held to be separate from one another. This constitutes the saintly course as expounded in the Samyuktabhi-dharma Hridaya Sastra. The profound and marvelous dhyanas experienced in the course of ease and bliss are decidedly not of this sort. Why? Because they do not linger in the desire realm, nor do they abide in the form or formless realms. Coursing in such dhyanas as these constitutes the all-pervading practice of the Bodhisattva. Because there is ultimately no mentation whatsoever, it is called practice devoid of distinguishing features. Next, there is the practice endowed with distinguishing features. This is the practice of reciting the Lotus Sutra and exerting oneself with scattered mind, as expounded in the chapter on the encouragements of universal worthy in the Lotus Sutra. Persons of this sort do not cultivate dhyana concentration, nor do they enter samadhi. Whether sitting, standing, or walking, they single-mindedly concentrate their attention on the written words of the Lotus Sutra, persevering earnestly at this practice without lying down to rest, as though desperate to extinguish a fire blazing on their heads. This is known as the practice endowed with features that involve the written word. These practitioners spare neither life nor limb. If their efforts are successful, they will thereupon see the adamantine body of universal worthy stationed directly before them, mounted on a king of elephants with 6 tusks. He will point the Vajra scepter at the practitioner's eyes, and all sins that obstruct the way will vanish. Their eye faculties having been purified, they will be able to see Buddha Shakyamuni and see the 7 Buddhas of the past. They will also see all the Buddhas of the 3 times throughout the 10 directions. Repenting with utmost contrition, they will drop to the ground in the 5-limbed prostration before the Buddhas. Arising and standing with palms joined in adoration, they will obtain the 3 types of Dharani gate. The first is the Dharani of total retention, which corresponds to the eye of flesh, the divine eye, and the Bodhisattva's wisdom of the path of deliverance. The second is the Dharani that can be turned to hundreds of thousands of millions of uses. It brings full acquisition of the Bodhisattva's wisdom that knows the various methods or paths for delivering sentient beings, and it is equivalent to purifications of the Dharma eye. The third is the Dharani of skill in the expedient use of Dharma sound, which is fully equipped with the Bodhisattva's omniscient wisdom of all modes of existence and represents purification of the Buddha eye. At this point, the practitioner becomes fully endowed with the Buddha Dharma of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. Some persons will be able to fulfill this goal within a single lifetime of practice. Others may achieve it in 2 lifetimes. At the very slowest, one will succeed in 3 lifetimes. However, if one harbors concern for life or limb, hankers after the 4 offerings, and is unable to apply oneself earnestly, one will not succeed, even after an aeon of lifetimes. In this respect, it is called practice endowed with features. Question. What do you mean when you say, because the mind does not move when in the midst of phenomena, it is said to be easeful? Because the mind is without the aggregates of sensation when in the midst of phenomena, it is said to be blissful. And because one strives to benefit oneself and benefit others, it is said to be a course or practice. Answer. The term all phenomena or all dharmas refer to such factors as the 3 poisons, the 4 elements, the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense accesses, the 18 sense spheres, the 12 members of cause and condition. This is what we mean by all phenomena. The Bodhisattva, when in the midst of all these sundry phenomena or dharmas, relies on the wisdom of 3 forms of forbearance. The first is known as forbearance towards sentient or living beings. The second is forbearance of the Dharma nature. The third is forbearance of supernatural power born of the ocean of the Dharma Dhatu or Dharma realm. Forbearance toward living beings is known as forbearance of arising or origination. Forbearance of the Dharma nature is known as Dharma forbearance. The forbearance of supernatural power of the ocean of the Dharma Dhatu or Dharma realm is known as great forbearance. The first 2 forms of forbearance are referred to as forbearance that eradicates ignorance and the afflictions. They are also known as forbearance of the saintly course. It is called the saintly course because it is the regime of activity proper to saints or enlightened beings. Ordinary beings who are able to practice these forbearances will thereby enter the stages of sainthood. In this sense, they are the saintly course. Great forbearance perfects the 5 supernormal powers together with the 6th supernormal power. It also perfects the 4 bases for development of the supernatural powers. Standing before all the Buddhas in the 10 directions, as well as the divine kings, one converses with them face to face. In a single instant, one is able to comprehend all ordinary beings and saints. Thus it is called great forbearance. While exercising these supernormal powers, the mind does not stir, and the saintly path is fulfilled. This we call forbearance of sainthood. These 3 forms of forbearance themselves constitute the course of ease and bliss that departs from clinging through right wisdom. Question. Why is it called forbearance of arising, and also called forbearance toward sentient beings? Why is it called immovable forbearance, and moreover referred to as easeful? Answer. Forbearance of arising signifies cause. Forbearance towards sentient beings signifies effect. Cause is the cause of sentient beings or sentient existence. Effect is the result or effect of sentient beings. The root cause is ignorance. The effect is the volitional constructs and activities of the physical body. Relying on right wisdom, one discerns the root cause, destroys ignorance, and severs the afflictions. All phenomena are ultimately devoid of coordinate conjunction and without any sign of aggregate arising, nor does one perceive any mark of dispersion. This is the subtle and marvelous wisdom of the Bodhisattva's realization of the noble truth of the origination of suffering. We refer to it as the forbearance of arising. If there is no coordinate conjunction, and things do not move or stir, then there is no arising of existence or beings to speak of. Forbearance toward sentient beings refers to the sensations associated with bodily activity. Sensation is painful. There are 3 types of sensation: sensation of pain, sensation of pleasure, and sensation that is neither painful nor pleasurable. How is this so? When beaten or reviled, one contemplates this sensation of pain as follows. Beating is bodily pain. Revilement is mental pain. Offerings of food, clothing, and objects that are fine and sleek to the touch are known as bodily pleasure. Various forms of sensual contact are also referred to as bodily pleasure. Acclaim and praise are considered mental pleasures. Let us say that you happen to receive a very fine donation. It is considered mental pleasure, both at the moment the eye spies the object, before it is actually taken in hand, and after the object has been received. One should contemplate this sensation born of ignorance, together with its attendant feelings of pleasure and pain. When you feel pain, you should arouse forbearance, loving kindness, and compassion, and refrain from giving rise to thoughts of anger. When you feel pleasure, contemplate thoughts of detachment from this sensation and do not crave for it. When you experience a sensation that is neither pleasurable nor painful, studiously avoid any thoughts of indifference and do not give rise to incognizance, for all such sensations are ultimately empty and devoid of any arising or perishing. These three forms of sensation in every case arise from a single instant of deluded thinking. When a bodhisattva contemplates these offerings, acts of beating and revilement, praise and defamation, he or she finds perpetrator and recipient to be like a dream or an illusion of magic. Who does the striking? Who does the reviling? Who suffers it? Who feels joy over it? Who becomes angry? Perpetrator and recipient are both just deluded thoughts. When one meditatively scrutinizes this deluded thinking, one discovers that ultimately there is no mind, no self, no person. The physical attributes of male and female, the person toward whom one feels hatred, affection, or apathy, the 6 divisions of the body, such as the head and so forth, are all unobtainable like shadows and empty space. Thus it is referred to as not moving. As it says in the samadhi of freely following one's thought, when immersed in the 18 sensory spheres, the bodhisattva personally experiences no arising or perishing of thoughts in the mind. Moreover, he or she instructs sentient beings in the fact that there is no arising or perishing. Beginning with birth and death and ending with bodhi, the nature of all phenomena fundamentally does not move. Whether it is to be the nature of the eye, the nature of material form, the nature of visual consciousness, the nature of ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the nature of sound, odor, taste, touch, and mental objects, or even the nature of the manifold sensations generated from the causes and conditions of oral consciousness, or the nature of any sensations generated from the causes and conditions of nasal, taste, touch, and cognitive consciousness. That nature is devoid of self, devoid of other, and is ultimately empty. In this respect, we characterize it as not moving. Because one realizes this fact for oneself and awakens others to it as well, we say easeful. One personally severs the 3 sensations so that they do not arise. Being ultimately empty and quiescent, the 3 forms of sensation are not to be found, and the sensation of any kind ultimately does not arise. This we refer to as blissful. While in the very midst of phenomena, one's own mind is free activity. Moreover, one teaches other sentient beings that the mind is inherently free of activity when in the midst of objects. Because one cultivates meditative concentration without ease and strives to uphold the Lotus Sutra, it is called practice or course. It is expounded in the section of the Angulimala Sutra on the meaning of the sensory access of the eye. or as expounded in the sections on Buddha nature in the treasure store of the Deskam One in the Nirvana Sutra. There are manifold meanings to the term course or practice of ease and bliss, not just a single meaning. Let me summarize them further from a somewhat different perspective. Ordinary beings, when immersed in the aggregates, sensory spheres, and sense accesses, give rise to sensation, cognition, and attachment, due to their ignorance and craving. They are given wholly to sinful and painful activities and are unable to put themselves at ease. Because the cycle of birth and death continues without cease, there is no pleasure or bliss for them. This is known as the course of pain. Shravakas and the various followers of the two vehicles are able to apply counteractive methods of contemplation while immersed in the aggregates, sensory spheres, and sense accesses. The method for contemplation of impurity is effective for extinguishing lust. The method for contemplation of loving-kindness is able to eliminate anger. The method for contemplation of cause and condition is able to sever delusion. Expounded under a different set of names, they are known as the 4 stations of mindfulness. There are 37 different designations for various aspects of these 4 stations of mindfulness. They are known as the 37 factors of enlightenment. Contemplating the body as impure, one is thereby able to ascertain that this impure body is rooted in ignorance, that it is empty, and that it has no basis of origin. The contemplation of impurity is able to eradicate all false views pertaining to the body. Male, female, persons whom one loves, persons whom one hates, and persons to whom one is indifferent, all revert to empty quiescence. This is known as defeating the Mara of the afflictions. By contemplating the aggregate of sensation associated with external pain, and the aggregate of sensation associated with internal pain, that arise on the basis of the constituent factors of the 18 sense fields and the 3 forms of sensation, one realizes that the aggregates of painful sensation, the volitional constructs of body and mind, and the bases of sensation, cognition, and attachment are in all respects fraught with pain. Abandoning them, one clings to neither internal sensations of pleasure, external sensations of pleasure, nor sensations of pleasure derived from both internal and external factors. One discerns that these pleasurable sensations are able to function as a cause of suffering precisely because the mind hankers after them. Casting them aside and refusing to indulge them, one comes to realize that pleasurable sensations are in all respects empty. The 2 contemplations of pleasure and pain are able to refute worldly or conventional truth, whereby the mind comes to dwell in ultimate truth. When one first abandons the pain and pleasure, one thereupon obtains the condition of neither pain nor pleasure. But because clinging is present, this condition of indifference to pleasure and pain is still tainted with ignorance. Thus one goes on to contemplate that this sensation of neither pain nor pleasure is groundless, impermanent, and subject to transformation and destruction. Why? By abandoning pleasure and pain, one obtains indifference to pleasure and pain. Since the 2 contemplations of pleasure and pain reveal pleasure and pain to be utterly empty and quiescent without any point of arising, and, likewise, without point of perishing, from whence could a notion of neither pain nor pleasure itself arise? When one contemplates in this fashion, everything is empty. With nothing to obtain and nothing to abandon, there being nothing to abandon, one does not further posit the notion of there being nothing to abandon. If there is no conventional truth, then there is no ultimate truth. The true and the provisional are both quiescent. At this point, one subdues the Mara of the aggregates, sense accesses, and sensory spheres. One contemplates that the mind is impermanent. It arises, perishes, and does not abide. Investigate from whence the mind originally arises, and when you discern in this fashion, you will not find any mind whatsoever, nor will you detect any sign of its arising or perishing. It is not inexistent, not eternally existent, nor does it occupy some middle position between the two alternatives. Having successfully performed this contemplation, there will be no Mara of death. In the mindfulness of constituents or factors, one contemplates that all constituents of experience, whether wholesome, unwholesome, or morally neutral, are inapprehensible, like empty space. In the very midst of phenomena, the mind ultimately does not stir, and is without any mark of abiding. One thereby obtains the immovable samadhi, whereupon there is no divine Mara. Because one obtains this liberation of progressive abandonment of the three forms of sensation, we call it the course of pain and pleasure. In terms of both cause and fruit, this course of practice is referred to as the path of the Shravaka. It is not the path of the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattvas of dual capacity also rely on this meditation, but their approach is different from that of the Shravaka, for it does not involve grasping or rejecting. How so? The three sensations born of material form and mind ultimately do not arise, and the 18 sensory spheres do not exist. Thus there is no seizing upon internal and external sensation. There is no sensation, there is nothing to abandon or reject, although the contemplative procedure is the same. Because there is no division between the three sensations, the expedient devices of skillfully adaptive wisdom can be brought to complete fulfillment. In this capacity, it is given the name course or practice of ease and bliss. However, contemplation in the course of ease and bliss proper is not like this. Here, one directly casts aside expedient devices and solely expounds the peerless enlightenment of the Buddhas. Bodhisattva Manjushri addressed the Buddha, saying, O world-honored one, how can these bodhisattvas preach this scripture in the latter evil age? The Buddha told Manjushri, if bodhisattva mahasattvas in the latter evil age wish to expound this scripture, they must dwell easefully in the four practices. First, by dwelling easefully in the regime of practice or activity, and in the range of associations appropriate to a bodhisattva, they will be able to expound this scripture for sentient beings. What is meant by the regime of practice appropriate to a bodhisattva? If a bodhisattva mahasattva abides firmly on the ground of forbearance when faced with humiliation, if he or she is gentle and congenial, skilled at accommodating and bringing others into compliance, not given to impulsiveness, and never alarmed in mind, if furthermore he or she performs no discriminatory act with respect to phenomena, but contemplates the thus-like true character of all phenomena, if he or she also does not act with or engage in non-discrimination, then this is called the regime of practice or activity appropriate to a bodhisattva mahasattva. What is meant by abiding firmly on the ground of forbearance when faced with humiliation? In brief, there are three types of forbearance. 1. Forbearance toward sentient beings. 2. Forbearance with respect to the dharmas or phenomena. And 3. Great forbearance, also known as forbearance of supernatural power. Forbearance toward sentient or living beings has three meanings to it. As to the first meaning, when a bodhisattva suffers beating, reviling, ridicule, humiliation, and slander at the hand of others, he or she must endure it and never seek to retaliate. One should take this view, because I have a body and invites beating and cursing. It is like a target, which is no sooner set up than an arrow finds its way to it. If I did not have a body, who would ever hit me? I should now earnestly cultivate the contemplation of emptiness. If my contemplation of emptiness is successful, there will be no person capable of beating or killing me. When reviled by others, one should ponder with correct mindfulness that the sound of the reviling subsides as soon as it is heard. Prior and after are not coterminous with one another. Discerning precisely, there is also no arising or perishing of the voice. It is like an echo in the air. Who reviles, who suffers it? The sound of the voice does not approach and enter the ear does not go forth and apprehend the sound. After one has contemplated in this manner, one will feel no anger or joy whatsoever. As for the second meaning, bodhisattvas never revile or strike sentient beings. Speaking gentle words, they strive to protect their minds and aspire to guide them. When faced with beating and cursing, their minds remain settled and do not become riled. This is known as forbearance toward sentient beings. When sentient beings witness the forbearance of the bodhisattva, they themselves put forth the resolution to seek enlightenment. Because this forbearance is initiated on behalf of sentient beings, it is called forbearance toward sentient beings. As for the third meaning, when confronted with sentient beings who are intractably evil, the bodhisattva, in order to subdue them and cause them to have a change of heart, sometimes uses harsh words, slander, reviling, and humiliation to arouse remorse and enabling them to foster wholesome mentalities. This is also known as forbearance toward sentient beings. What does humiliation mean? That which we are unable to endure is what we mean by humiliation. There is no other aspect beyond this. Question: to endure beating and reviling without anger, or to show loving kindness and compassion through the use of gentle words, these may properly be called forbearance. But how can it be considered forbearance when a bodhisattva, confronted with intractably evil persons, is unable to tolerate their abuses, displays looks of rage, strikes, reviles, humiliates, and violently crushes these people into submission, thereby causing them pain? Answer: to accept beating and cursing without thought of reprisal, this is the forbearance of external deportment expounded in the conventional world of moral restraint. Moreover, contemplating that one is internally empty, that the voice and so forth are empty, and that the body and mind are empty and quiescent, thereby not giving rise to resentment, is an expedient form of forbearance that the novice bodhisattva uses to pacify worldly ridicule and contempt, and to cultivate moral restraint, meditative concentration, and wisdom. It is not representative of the great bodhisattva. Why? Bodhisattvas simply discern what will be beneficial to sentient beings and tame them straightway. In the effort to protect the great vehicle and safeguard the true Dharma, they do not necessarily use loving-kindness, compassion, and gentle speech on all occasions. As it says in the Nirvana Sutra, it is like King Zhiyi from long ago, who once put to death 500 Brahmins in order to protect the Vaipulya Sutras of the Mahayana, causing them, as their lives came to an end, to enter the Avicii hell and arouse the thought of enlightenment. How is this not great kindness and compassion? There is none other than great forbearance. The Nirvana Sutra further relates how, once upon a time, the king endowed with virtue In order to protect the Dharma master, enlightened virtue, and preserve the true Dharma, put to death all evildoers in his land who violated the precepts, allowing the Dharma master, enlightened virtue, to carry out his practice of the true Dharma. When he died, the king was reborn in the presence of Aksobhya Buddha to the east, where he became his foremost disciple. His retinue of courtly ministers and soldiers was also reborn in the presence of Buddha Aksobhya, where they became disciples of the second and third order. When they died, the lay and monastic evildoers who violated the precepts all plummeted to the Avicii hell. In the Avicii hell, they came to recognize their sins, thinking to themselves, "The king put me to death, because I tormented and harmed the Dharma master, enlightened virtue." Thereupon, having each aroused this thought, they made the resolution to seek perfect enlightenment. Coming forth from the Avicii hell, they were reborn in the vicinity of Dharma master, enlightened virtue, and king endowed with virtue, where they became their disciples and sought supreme enlightenment. This is the Bodhisattva's forbearance of great expediency. It is not something that lesser bodhisattvas are able to achieve. How can one say that it is not forbearance? The Dharma master, enlightened virtue, was none other than Kasyapa Buddha. King endowed with virtue was Shakyamuni Buddha. A bodhisattva intent on protecting the Dharma must also be like this. How can one not call it great forbearance? If a bodhisattva practicing worldly forbearance does not take steps to correct evildoers, but allows their evil to grow and thereby hastens the destruction of the true Dharma, such a bodhisattva is an evil Mara, not a bodhisattva. He does not even deserve to be called a Shravaka. Why? In aspiring to worldly forbearance, one cannot protect the Dharma. One is actually doing the work of Mara, even though outwardly one looks to be practicing forbearance. If a bodhisattva would strive to cultivate great kindness and compassion, bring to fulfillment the qualities of forbearance, establish the great vehicle, and protect sentient beings, he must not cling exclusively to worldly forbearance. Why? If a bodhisattva protects evil people and cannot bring himself to punish them, then he enables them to increase their evils, bring torment and confusion to good people, and hasten the destruction of the true Dharma. This person is, in truth, not a bodhisattva, but one who outwardly feigns the appearance of a bodhisattva. Constantly he claims, "I practice forbearance," but when his life reaches its end, such a person tumbles to the Avicii hell, along with the rest of the evildoers. For this reason, it cannot be called forbearance. What, furthermore, does it mean to abide firmly on the ground of forbearance? The forbearance of the bodhisattva is able to produce all the meritorious virtues of Buddhahood. It is analogous to the great earth which produces and nourishes all things in the world. Forbearance is like this as well. When bodhisattvas engage in the practice of great forbearance, sometimes they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and the use of gentle words, refusing to requite beating and cursing. On the other occasions, they act with vicious tongues and harsh words, striking and beating sentient beings even to the point of taking life. These two forms of forbearance are both used for the purpose of protecting the true Dharma and taming sentient beings. They are not something that novice bodhisattvas can handle, whence they are referred to as fully equipped or perfected forbearance. Dharma forbearance has three meanings to it. As to the first meaning, when personally undertaking practice of the saintly course, one discerns that all phenomena or dharmas are utterly empty and quiescent, devoid of arising and perishing, and neither inherently inexistent nor permanently existent. By all phenomena, we mean that one discerns the faculty of the eye to be empty, the faculties of ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind to be empty. One discerns sight to be empty, and discerns sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects to be empty. and one discerns the eye consciousness to be empty, as well as oral, nasal, taste, touch, and cognitive consciousnesses all to be empty. There is no self, no person, no sentient being, no action, and no one who suffers or experiences the action. Retribution from good and evil deeds is also like a flower in the sky. The elements of material form and the rest of the five aggregates, the sensory spheres and the sense accesses, are all empty. The 18 sensory spheres, comprised of their 3 sets of 6, are nameless. They have no anterior, no posterior, no in-between. From the outset, they are by nature eternally quiescent. If the mind does not move when confronted with the myriad phenomena, this is known as a bodhisattva who is practicing dharma forbearance. As for the second sense, bodhisattvas who are completely equipped with dharma forbearance also instruct sentient beings in this teaching. Scrutinizing their respective differences in superior, middling, and inferior capacity, the bodhisattvas expediently convert sentient beings and cause them to dwell in the great vehicle. Whether Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, or Bodhisattva, the 3 courses of meditative practice merge to become one and the same, with no difference whatsoever in their saintly activities of body and mind. The 2 vehicles of Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha, ordinary beings and saints, are from the outset one and the same Dharma body, which itself is none other than the Buddha. As for the third meaning, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas scrutinize sentient beings with their autonomous wisdom, expediently adopt commensurate modes of activity, and tame them accordingly. Sometimes they put on a display of keeping the precepts and observing the finest points of protocol. At other times they put on an appearance of violating the precepts and being completely bereft of noble deportment. In fulfillment of their original vows, these Bodhisattva Mahasattvas manifest the physical likenesses of the 6 destinies of rebirth in order to tame living beings. This is known as a bodhisattva who practices dharma forbearance, who, having perfected the use of expedient devices, effects the transformation of sentient beings. Great forbearance is known as the forbearance of supernatural power. What does forbearance of supernatural power mean? At the moment when bodhisattvas first arouse a thought of enlightenment, they vowed to deliver all beings throughout the 10 directions. Earnestly applying themselves to the 6 perfections, including charity, morality, forbearance, earnest perseverance, meditative concentration, the 37 factors of enlightenment as taught in the 3 vehicles, and acquisition of omniscient wisdom, they thereby realize nirvana and enter deeply into the limit of ultimate reality. Above, they see no Buddhas; below, they see no sentient beings. Thereupon they think, I originally vowed to save all sentient beings, but now I do not see any sentient being whatsoever. I wonder if this is not contrary to my former vow. The moment they conceive this thought, all the Buddhas of the present age, throughout the 10 directions, immediately manifest their physical forms. In unison they praise these bodhisattvas, saying, Excellent, well done, great and worthy son. Bear in mind your original vow and do not abandon sentient beings. When we first set out in quest of enlightenment, we Buddhas also made the great vow to save beings on a vast scale and earnestly practice the way. Upon realizing nirvana and entering deeply into the limit of absolute reality, we saw no sentient beings to save. But recalling our original vows, we had feelings of contrition and directed our thoughts back to the plight of sentient beings. At that moment we saw all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, who praised us in unison, saying, We had the same experience as you. Bear in mind your original vow and do not abandon sentient beings. When the Buddhas of the 10 directions utter these words, the minds of the bodhisattvas, upon hearing these words of the Buddha, become rapt with great joy, whereupon they immediately acquire vast supernatural powers. Sitting in the midst of empty space, they see all the Buddhas of the 10 directions and become completely equipped with the wisdoms of all the Buddhas. In a single instant of thought, they fathom to the full the minds of the Buddhas of the 10 directions, and also know the mental functions of every living being. In a single instant of thought, they are able to survey them in their entirety. In one and the same moment, they conceive the desire to save all sentient beings. Because their minds are vast, it is known as great forbearance. Because they are fully endowed with the attributes of the Buddhas and the great person, it is called great forbearance. In the effort to deliver sentient beings, they match physical appearance and wisdom to differences in salvific circumstance. In a single instant of thought, they manifest all manner of physical forms. In one and the same moment, they expound the Dharma for these diverse beings. The sound of a single voice is able to produce innumerable voices, causing countless beings to attain enlightenment at one and the same moment. This is called forbearance of supernatural power. As for being gentle, congenial, and skilled at accommodating and bringing others into compliance, first, one tames one's own mind. Second, one strives to tame other beings. Congenial means to develop the 6 forms of congenial respect, to observe the precepts, cultivate meditative concentration and wisdom, and realize the attributes of liberation. In addition, it means to realize that pacifying the anger and hatred of sentient beings, forbearing in the face of humiliation, observing the precepts, and violating the prohibitions all share the same mark of nirvana. The 6 forms of congeniality, including congeniality of mind, congeniality of body, congeniality of speech, congeniality respect to the moral restraints or norms, congeniality with respect to benefit, and congeniality in look or appearance. Skill at accommodating and bringing others into compliance means to be adept at detecting the basic disposition of sentient beings and adopting measures to accommodate and tame them accordingly. This is known as adopting similar or commensurate activity. It is subsumed within the 6 supernatural powers. Gentle and congenial refers to Dharma forbearance. Skill at bringing others to compliance refers to great forbearance. Not given to impulsiveness means that in practicing the Buddhist Dhamma, one does not impulsively lay claim to realization and outwardly put on airs of noble deportment. The same applies in training sentient beings. As for never alarmed in mind, alarmed means to move or stir. Being impulsive is the same as being easily agitated. Whether confronted with good sounds or bad sounds, or even sudden claps of thunder, various detestable manifestations or good physical appearances, when the ears hear them and the eyes behold them, the mind is not stirred to the slightest. Because the Bodhisattva understands the teaching of emptiness, there is ultimately no mind to stir. Hence we say that one is never alarmed in mind. Furthermore, he or she performs no discriminatory act with respect to phenomena. This means that among the 5 aggregates, 18 sensory spheres, 12 factors of causation, and so forth, all constituents and aspects of affliction are utterly empty. Hence there is no mind, and no basis where mind might be located. Furthermore, among the meditative concentrations and liberations, there is no wisdom, no mind, and no practice to undertake, but contemplates or discerns the thus-like true character of phenomena, means that the 5 aggregates, the 18 spheres, the 12 factors of causation, are all the true nature of thusness. There is no root or branch, no arising or perishing. There is no affliction, no liberation. Also, he does not act with or engage in non-discrimination, means that cyclic birth and death and nirvana are without sameness, without difference. Ordinary beings and Buddhas do not constitute two different Dharma spheres. For this reason, it is not possible to discriminate between them. Moreover, because one does not perceive them as not being two separate things, not two or non-dual, we say that he does not act with non-discrimination. Because the mark of non-discrimination is itself unobtainable, the Bodhisattva abides in the samadhi of namelessness. Yet, even though he or she has no fixed abode, the Bodhisattva is able to produce all the supernormal powers without deliberately resorting to expedient techniques. This is known as the regime of practice or activity appropriate to a Bodhisattva Mahasattva. One becomes equal to this status upon first entering the stages of sainthood. This is the true and everlasting body of Dharma essence that knows no movement. It is not the Dharma body of expedience born of the coalescence of conditioning factors. It may also be called realizing the treasure store of the thus come one, down to and including realization of the treasure store of the cognitive faculty.